Well, hello there, and welcome to the beginning of Unit 5. So, believe it or not, we are halfway through our spring semester, which is both exciting and probably in some ways kind of a freak out mode, right? So, oh my goodness, you just had spring break, and now we've only got 7, 8 weeks left. This is crazy, but we're going to make it. So, you're doing a great job. Hang in there. Your work has been really just exemplary. I'm hoping and trusting that you have been learning just a good amount about this kind of this new, perhaps, space of career development. I know that you've been reading some, I wouldn't say conflicting, and I'm using that word because that was one of the questions that was asked. Not conflicting messages, but hopefully you're seeing more kind of cohesive messages where we're seeing how vocation kind of trickles into and calling trickles into career development, and vice versa. Career development can potentially trickle into one's vocation and calling. You've been reading Schwen and Bass, and I hope you've been enjoying that. It's a wonderful book. Getting to read some of my favorite authors, whether it be Sayers, I think Lee Hardy comes up at some point, Wendell Berry, just really thoughtful individuals that are speaking into what does it mean to pursue one's calling, if you want to say it that way. What does it mean to think about vocation, the different stations thereof? I love the idea that we're talking about how in this, especially from a Christian space where we're coming from in this course, in this program, how do we think about this so often what's misconstrued as this duality between sacred spaces and secular spaces? And is there really such a thing? And if I'm not working for a quote church or otherwise, is that not as sacred? Is it not as important and so forth? And hopefully you're seeing that. I don't know that God has some kind of parameters upon which He places and says this is sacred and this is secular. Because one of the things that you may have seen along the way, and we may even have some reference, I can't recall, if we see this in the Schwen and Bass, is Abraham Kuyper. If you want to know more about him, he's done all sorts of writings. He was a parliamentarian. I think he was actually a prime minister of the Netherlands or somewhere, I think in that region, can't remember exactly. But he once famously said, there is not a square inch of the entire universe, I'm going to butcher this, that God does not look at and scream, mine over. It's all His. And so for us to then put these parameters and say this is sacred, this is secular, really becomes problematic. And so obviously as we're going to get into a lot of these conversations with clients and talk about career, in the back of our minds we can be thinking about these realities, depending on who it is that's sitting across the table or on the couch or across from us in the chair. We may or may not have that specific conversation from a faith perspective. And we may be in different kind of places and spaces with regard to the faith conversation, the faith aspect. However, I think that it is helpful for, I don't think, I should stop saying think. I know that it's helpful for us to keep in mind these realities, these really kind of the gravitas of these truths, because I'm confident that they will, in many significant ways, help to inform the work that we do and the practices that we carry out in this really, I think, exciting and important space of career development if you were to choose to go that direction. So a lot of the questions that have been asked have been great questions. I don't want to speak specifically to them because what I'm getting is a lot of these questions that are again, kind of in a little bit, and I wouldn't say entirely, but in a little bit, based upon personal, maybe approach. I'm looking here at another one. Approach and I wouldn't say necessarily beliefs, but really just kind of, I think the best way to say it is just approach. How would you do this? And here's what I'm going to throw out you. And I know that nobody really likes this, but this is kind of what we're known for in the Academy, is answering someone's question with a question, right? So turn it around and saying, what do you think about that? And in some ways, that can oftentimes be seen as code for, if I ask you, what do you think about that? That means that I don't either have an answer for you, I haven't really thought through an answer, I don't want to answer it, and so I'm turning around. I don't want to say that here. And I don't even want to give off that appearance because that's not the intention at all. But when I say I'm going to answer your question with a question, it's not really a question, but it's more of a statement about a question. And that's that there is incredible power in the questions that we're asking. Okay, so there's one question here, and I'll read a couple of these. It says, let's see, how would a career counselor effectively engage a client conversation about conflicting viewpoints on progress? Okay, the client may believe they've reached their goals, but even if the counselor holds a different viewpoint, it seems like a difficult task to get a client that believes they no longer need services to believe any different. It's a great question. And I don't know that we can necessarily convince them, right? So if you're thinking about, maybe you're meeting with somebody who has PTSD, okay, they've seen some terrible things, they've had some just incredibly awful things take place with them in their lives, personally, professionally, and so forth, and they came and met with you as a therapist one time, and you basically did an intake, you asked a few questions, and then at the end of the time they said, great, I'm healed, I don't need to come back and see you anymore, whatever terminology they may use. You would probably be at some point, now, can they quote fire you, right? Can they go away and go see somebody different? Sure, right? Absolutely. I mean, they're entirely up to they're able to make those decisions. From a career standpoint, this is a little bit different, at least how I would interpret and how I would handle that. When I meet with a client, I tell them, I say, I don't think we can actually accomplish what needs to be accomplished, and I'll walk through this process of what I think is really the kind of the task at hand. I don't think we can accomplish that in fewer than four meetings. And so if you're going to sign up to work with me, I have to get from you, basically, I would say, I need a guarantee that you'll meet with me 4 times. Because if you don't do that, I don't know that we can actually get to a place of helping you with your situation. Now, if someone says, I want to help me write a resume, I don't need to meet with you 4 times. If someone says, I want you to write a cover letter or help you with interview prep, things like that, I don't think we need to meet 4 times. But if they're actually looking for career coaching or career counseling, kind of however you would term the work that we're doing here, I would say that my approach is a minimum of 4 times. Now, after that, it's entirely up to you. But I think that, and I would say, I don't think I'm very, very confident that we can accomplish what needs to take place in those 4 meetings. Now, if somebody said, well, I'm done. I come for my intake, which is the first one. We ask some questions about where are you, kind of a what's up conversation for 45 minutes, 60 minutes, and then they leave. It's not going to help them. Even a what's so, right? So, and that's the next step for me. It's what's up, what's so, what's possible, let's go. And we need to walk through these 4 sessions to figure out what's next, right? I just had a client we worked with, and this client wanted to speed things up quite a bit. They wanted to meet with some pretty significant rapidity. I mean, they went quickly. They met in 2 weeks, what regularly takes 4 weeks. Now, I wouldn't necessarily probably encourage that. I do think there needs to be some time in between. However, the way that this panned out actually worked, I think, fairly well. And I said, at the end of this, you tell me if you need to meet again, but I think we can accomplish what needs to take place in 4 meetings. They didn't come back and push back and say, no, I think we need to do 3. And my trick there is if you want to pay up front, you actually save some money, right? So if you pay for all 4 sessions, and then there's some incentive because now they have some skin in the game. So you could pay this per meeting, which doesn't guarantee that they're going to come back. But if you have them pay up front, they save a couple of bucks, then there's probably more of an investment to keep coming back. So that's one approach. But if a client says, I think I'm good, I think I figured out what I want to do, we can't really, I wouldn't even encourage you to get into a conflicted, conversation or quote argument, because it's just not worth it. Because ultimately they're the paying customer, and if they decide they don't want to do that anymore, then that's up to them. But I think we have the power to ask really intentional, important questions. And so I would encourage you, if you're thinking about going this route, to think about what would those questions be? What questions do I need to ask? Would I want to be asked? And so forth. Because we're not really, I think in this space, while we have answers, or hopefully we have answers, I don't know that my responsibility is to be some person that kind of doles out answers. I think what I'm supposed to be doing is asking the right intentional questions. So what are the things that you like about what you do? What don't you like about what you do? What would you like to do in the future? What have you explored doing? Have you done this? Have you done this? Have you studied this? Have you thought about grad school? Have you thought about, going back and finishing your bachelor's degree? All of these questions, they're paying in a lot of ways for you to ask those questions, similar to education. So you're getting this MFT. Now, you can't get licensed, obviously, without going through a program. But if there were certain things that you wanted to learn, you could potentially just go out and buy a bunch of books, right? You could go to Barnes & Noble or some other bookstore, hopefully a local bookstore. You could buy those books, and you can learn what you wanted to. You could potentially go back to school and learn a language, or you could do Rosetta Stone, right? You could learn on your own. And Rosetta Stone's probably not the best example for where I'm going with this, but you could go to the bookstore and buy a bunch of books and learn about things. If I really wanted to learn about finance, I could go buy the textbooks. I could do all of these things. I could go learn about finance, or I could go to school and get a Master of Science in Finance or something like that. And over the course of a year or two, get a degree in finance that kind of is this stamp that says you now know about finance, so much so that I could hire you into a role where we have a requirement for financial kind of acumen and understanding. The role of the educator. So the role that I'm doing here is I have taken, and I think I've probably said this before, information that is literally available to the masses. None of this is hidden, right? These assessments we talk about, these books we read, none of this is hidden. In fact, you can go buy that Schwen and Bass book. When we first started, it was 99 cents, right? 99 cents for a Kindle version of a book is not a huge impediment, especially these days. You can read it online, you can read it on an iPhone, you can read it on an iPad, and so forth. You don't even need an iPad or a Kindle. 99 cents, you can read about it. But what I've done is I said, okay, I'm going to package this learning together, and we're going to together look at this. And so I've taken information available to the masses and brought it in bite-sized ways that make it palatable and understanding in shorter amounts of time for you to then grasp and go from here having been not fully informed, because we can't learn everything, but more informed than you probably were beforehand to say, I have a pretty good grasp on this. In the same way, while I am doling out information in this class from an information broker standpoint, you and I in our counseling sessions, while we have the ability to dole out information, we are actually more in the business, especially in the career space, of asking questions. Instead of doling out, we want to be pulling out what's inside the client, because we really can't help them figure out what they want to do for work if they don't have answers that they're willing to discuss, and we can't get the information out of them if we don't have ask the right questions. So I think that there's a place where you have to figure out, when am I over my head and I need to refer out. So it could be to a therapist, could be some sort of licensed counselor. It could be this is above my pay grade. I'm not sure. I don't think you need to go see a counselor, but I think what you're asking about this is it's not my forte. Like for me, if someone said I need you to help me get this job, I'm not a recruiter. I mean, I can make connections, but no one's necessarily paying me to do that, and that's not my expertise. So I wouldn't be able to do that, but I could say, hey, I think you need to speak with a recruiter. So that's not what I'm able to do, and I think I just need to ask the right questions. So know when to refer out, know when it's above my pay grade, when I'm outside of my scope of expertise, and then know what questions to ask. And if the moment calls for it, know when I am to kind of offer up suggestions. Have you thought about this? But even then, that's suggesting something by way of asking questions. Because as I've mentioned, I think before, we want to kind of, my Big Fat Greek Wedding, as the main character in the movie says, she talks about jokingly, she says something like the secret to happy marriage is you come up with an idea and convince your husband that it was his idea. And while that's funny, there's some truth there, right? We want to help our clients. We want to come up with ideas in our mind. We want to help by way of asking questions to help them think that they came up with the ideas they're going to solve their solutions or their problems, solutions to their problems. But we also wanted to pinpoint back then to the process that we took them through to help them come to those decision-making processes and figure out that this is exactly what they need to do. So big idea here, ask questions, lots and lots of questions. There's a great book that I will, in the next video, be sharing about positive psychology coaching, and it asks a lot of career and work-related questions, and it may be something that you would want to check out. So keep asking those questions. You're doing a great job with that. I really am grateful for your investment in that. by way of asking these questions, I think you're probably learning in some pretty powerful ways that if I were to just dole it out to you, you wouldn't. And so I'm grateful for your engagement there. I'll have another video posting where we're headed for the rest of this unit, and in some ways where we're going for the rest of this semester.